How to film guitar playthroughs on your own. Today's guitar playthrough tutorial is part 1 of a 3-part series. In today's lesson, I'll go over my entire technique, including camera angles, camera settings, lighting, lens choices, as well as include some general tips to improve your composition. So if any of that interests you, let's dive right in. So before we start filming, the most important aspect is to know how to actually play the entire song the whole way through. My ethics with guitar playthroughs is that I want somebody to be able to learn to play the song just by watching the playthrough alone. So I have to make sure that I actually play the parts properly, as well as make sure that all of the important moments are visible. So the second thing to keep in mind is that depending on which program you're using, you'll have certain limitations. So say for example, if you're filming with DaVinci Resolve, the free version, you can only shoot 8-bit video and below. So obviously you can't do 10-bit. If you're using a phone camera, you'll be fine, as they are 8-bit I believe. You'll have to look up the specs. But if you're using something like Premiere or Final Cut or something else, you're probably gonna be okay. The third thing to keep in mind is to choose the right frame rate. So we're used to seeing 24 frames per second when we watch movies and TV shows, but 24 frames per second has a lot of motion blur, so when I'm shaking my hand, you'll see the blur. Right now I'm shooting at 30 frames per second, so I'm getting a little bit less, as well as I'm getting 6 more images per second. So with guitar playthrough, since certain moments on guitar will be really quick, it's better to go 30 frames per second in my opinion, and I don't suggest to go 60 frames per second. For one, it looks super strange to me, but aside from that, you're gonna need way more light. Basically the way that footage works is if you're shooting 24 frames per second, your shutter speed should be basically double, so it should be at least 1/50th to get proper motion blur. So at 30 frames per second, we should be at 1/60th, which gets a little bit darker. If we're shooting at 60 frames per second, our shutter speed should be at 1/120th, and that gets really dark. So if you don't have pro lights or you don't have really good quality lights, depending on if you're using your phone, it will automatically adjust and then you'll get very grainy and disgusting footage. So that's why I recommend using 30 frames per second and shooting 4K, if you can. When I'm filming my guitar playthroughs, I have some sort of like click track, at least 4 or 8 clicks going into the song, and this is because I edit using something called a multicam. Basically, I'll take my 5 or 6 angles and put them onto one wave track and then just cut it up. The reason that we need to have 4 or 8 clicks before the song starts is that we need something to sync to. So if say one take has 4 clicks and the song starts and the next song has 6 clicks and the song starts, there's a good chance that your multicam will be confused, so it's important to keep it all consistent. I always do either 4 or 8 clicks right before the song starts, that way my multicam knows what's up and it's no problem. The other thing to keep in mind is that, say you mess up, it's important to stop your footage and start a new one. I've noticed in all of the programs I use for multicam, if you start a take and it does the 4 clicks and the song starts and then you mess up and then you just try it again and it has the 4 clicks again, the multicam doesn't really know where to start. It just gets really confused and then you usually get an error and you won't be able to use that in your multicam footage. So it's important, if you mess up, just stop, start it over again, and then let the 4 clicks happen and do the entire song. So here are some key terms we're going to be going over with lighting. Key light is basically your main light. So I have my key light right here, which is shining the light onto my face, and then I have a light right here, which is my backlight, and you can see the light right here. It's not obviously on my face, it's on my back. So key light, backlight, and then I have an RGB light, which is why there's blue light right over here. And then the next type of lighting is something called a motivated or practical light. So it's basically a light that you actually see on your camera, and this kind of tricks the viewer. So basically this light's right here, but it's way behind me. But since my key light is also on the same side, right there, it almost makes the viewer think that the light's coming from there. This is what it would look like. But using motivated lights, it makes it seem like the light's coming from here. So now we have this, and it makes a lot more sense. Our next one is a fill light. I don't have a fill light right now, I have a reflector. So a fill light will be on the side, this side's darker. If it was completely black and we wanted to add a little bit of light, there would be a fill light here just to light my face a little bit more. I'm using a reflector right here. Right now we don't have a reflector, so this side of my face is completely dark. But by using this $1 dollar store piece of Bristol board, I guess, you can take it from this and then including the reflector, look at this side of the face just lit up way more with the reflector, without. So now for the camera terminology. So the first thing that we're going to deal with is focal length, and it's basically just our lens. It's basically how zoomed in or wide it is. So you can see here are 4 examples of different focal lengths, and they all have their own look. So you can see that 18 mil is super wide and you get a lot more information, which isn't necessarily what you want. And then all the way over here to 85, the opposite end, it's a lot more zoomed in, but we get a lot more compression. So you can see with the 18 mil, it looks like whatever's behind me is a lot further behind me. With the 85 mil, it looks like it's way closer. I'm in the exact same position though. The next one is aperture. So you'll see usually on a lens, there's like an F and then a number. The aperture is basically how much light your lens lets in, but also how much depth of field. And depth of field is basically when your item in focus, you can see I'm in focus and then my background's not in focus. That's depth of field. So the lower the number, the bigger your lens will open up and the more of that blur you'll get. It's important to keep this in mind that if you're shooting on a phone, phones don't have depth of field, and if they do, it's AI, fake depth of field. So it usually looks a little wonky, but obviously if you don't have money to buy a camera, it's all good. We can still work with these terms. Shutter speed is basically how quick your shutter opens. Larger the number, it'll be like 1/50th or 1/20th, whatever. The bigger that second number, the darker it's gonna be and the quicker that your shutter goes. So that's why I was suggesting earlier that you shouldn't shoot 60 frames per second because you'll need really strong lights in order to get away with it. The last thing is synchro scan. So we can see in this example, not all cameras have this. I don't think iPhones do, but basically we're gonna be changing our shutter speed by instead of 1/50th, like 1/60th, or we're gonna be going in degree angles. So this is what it looks like normally at 180 shutter degree angle. You can see all the flickering, and I'm just gonna keep scrolling up. 185 now. You can see it's getting a little bit better on the text there. And that's not bad. That's 196. And this happens a lot with cheaper lights or lights that aren't calibrated for whether you're from North America or from UK or from wherever you are in the world. If they're not calibrated for your region, you'll probably get these scan lines. This is really the only way that we can get rid of these scan lines. You can't do it in post. So this next piece of information might actually change the way that you see film. I know it did for me. 90% of shots are filmed from the shadow side. And what I mean by that is my light is over here. And even right now I'm shooting from the shadow side, which is over here. And this way we get more dimension. So if we shoot from this side, we won't see as much of the shadow and it'll just look flat. But if you shoot from the shadow side, you get a lot more of the dimension, and you'll see like in promos and in photos a lot of the time, they get Rembrandt lighting, which is basically that little triangle right here that you see right now. It's gone. And there it is. And if you're using an iPhone and you can't really work with the depth of field, this is the best thing that you can do to make your image look a little bit better. So a little background information about camera angles. Basically, if you're shooting down on someone, it'll make them look weak. You can see from this example, I look like a little child. Whereas if you're shooting upwards, the person or the subject will look a lot more powerful. Right now, I'm not shooting upwards or downwards, I'm shooting straight. So it just looks neutral. All right, so right now we're at a 35 millimeter. We are at f1.8, 1.8 aperture. So we can see this section is relatively blurry. We have a decent amount of brightness because our aperture is quite low. And we're focused on my hand right here. If we like want to show what that right hand's doing. Then we can do this angle because we can have a clear vantage point of what this hand's doing and the articulation, because we're shooting from this angle. This side of my hand isn't blocking the frame, whereas over here, this side of my hand is blocking the frame. So if I'm doing like notey stuff, this section of my hand is blocking the actual note. So you can't see what my pinky or other fingers are doing. So now we're at f5.6, and two things that we can do to get around how dark it is. I'm just gonna raise the light. That way I don't have to change the ISO on my camera, therefore making it grainier. So let's raise the light to a decent amount, which is a lot more than where we were at before. So now I haven't changed the focus point at all. I'm still focused in the exact same spot over here, but we can see a lot more of this is in focus and less blurry. So now the only difference is that I've moved the light to be over here instead of being over here. So instead of shooting from the light side, I'm shooting now from the shadow side. And you should see the dimension. You can especially see the shadow on my face on this side. And before, the whole face, everything was lit evenly. Now you can see a bit of that shadow on my guitar and everything, and it just adds a little bit more dimension. I'll be sitting right there. I've got the camera right here, as you can see, and my main light right there. This one's shooting all the light on my left side, and then this side here has no light, so it's going to be relatively dark, so we get those nice shadows. And then I have this backlight right here that is just to illuminate the hair, but also to make me stand out from the background. And then I have this RGB light right here that's just shining the color. So when I sit down, I've got my little monitor right there, camera's right there, and yeah, this is my setup for the first shot. Alright, so this is the second angle. I'm sitting right there. The camera is oriented right there, so I'm getting a little bit of my keyboard. So I'm again filming on the shadow side. And then there's my key light pointing down at me. And then my backlight is just illuminating my hair a little bit and the back of the guitar, and you'll see what that's doing. And then the blue light is right there, just shining on the brick a bit, so I keep that blue feel. Got my key light, computer, camera, hair light right there, blue light. Alright, here we are using a 50mm lens. I wanted a little bit more compression. This one's a little bit weird. I had to move the key light from over here to get a little bit of a different look. So I got my key light now lighting the left side of me, and I have an 18mm lens. It's gonna give that crazy, super distorted fisheye kind of looking thing. Got my seat, backlight right there, seat, and then I got the blue light right here, shining some color. The camera is insanely close to the guitar. Guitar is right there, monitor, camera. That's basically the shot. I'm probably gonna clean up this area down here and rearrange it so it looks a little bit nicer. So then with this shot, I have it so my feet are laid out, my right foot goes on there, just so I don't lose my focus point because I'm in manual focus. That's where my left foot goes, just right before it. And then I have that backlight. This is my backlight, that's actually my motivated light. And then the camera set up right here, getting my shadow side. This time I'm shooting with a 50mm. I like the compression a lot. I tried the 35, it was a little bit too wide for me. And then I have my backlight just over my right shoulder. Camera's here, my key light over my left shoulder in front of me. And then the blue light just to the left, down, a little bit lower. Alright, so for this shot, I'll be sitting right there. Got the light over my left shoulder, it's my key light. Camera shooting from right here, my right side, shadow side. You know the drill by now. And then over my left shoulder is the backlight. And then I have a little reflector here to bounce a little bit of this light back onto my dark side so that you can see a little bit. Then let's turn the motivational light on. And then now our key light. So here I'll be filming, the camera is right there. My key light is right here over my left shoulder, again shooting from shadow side. This time my backlight, don't really have much of a backlight, it's kind of just this stock one right there. And then I'm using this light as well to get a little bit of light on my lenses, but also to just light the scene in general because I'm using a macro lens, this Laowa one right here. But I'm shooting at like f/5.6, so I need a lot of light compared to what I'm shooting at f/1.8 on my other lenses. And these shots I like a lot to just show a little bit of your personality and your interests and stuff like that, so I'm going to be focusing on my Lumix lens collection over here. Show a little bit of what you're interested in the background. It doesn't always have to be just music stuff. If you have other interests, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, whatever, have it in the background. Blue light, illuminating all the lenses and just giving the blue feel in the rest of the shots. So let me know in the comments down below if you'd like me to film one of these guitar playthroughs using my iPhone instead of my expensive camera and lenses. So that concludes part 1 of this series. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn the next step, bringing this footage into DaVinci Resolve and editing in a multicam and otherwise, check out this video right here. Thank you so much, and if you found any use in the video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.